are you supposed to read your podcast statistics on Chartable? Well, today I'm going to dive into all the things that you need to know about this amazing platform. So let's get right to it. Hey everybody, Krystal here, and today we're going to dive into how you can use your podcast statistics from Chartable in a very unique way. So the first thing that I want to dive into is what the heck is Chartable? So I'm talking about chartable.com, and it's where you can find all kinds of awesome information about podcasts. And I know I'm like total numbers nerd here, but I think that it has some really good information out there. I've seen in a lot of podcast communities where they're just like, Chartable, it doesn't make sense to me. I don't know how I can use this. I'm much better off just using my podcast hosting site statistics. And I will say, I'm part of the Buzzsprout community, and they have amazing podcast statistics. If you want to dive into everything that has to do with your own podcast, but what I use Chartable for is something totally different. So Chartable is a place to see easily and just add a snapshot of where your podcast is ranking on the charts, hence the name Chartable. It is all about charts. And so while they do provide information about your specific downloads and your how your episodes are doing and everything, I look at it to see how my overall podcast is working in the charts. Or if you want to use it as like a comparison of how your podcast is held up against someone else within your industry. I don't recommend you doing that very often, because I think that kind of gets you into this like comparison trap of like, oh, well, my show isn't doing as well as someone else's, or blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't want you to go down that kind of rabbit hole, because I don't think that's productive for anybody. But I do think that there are some ways that you can use the information from Chartable in order to do some really cool marketing things. So let's talk about those. So like I said, the information that you get on Chartable is different than what you have on your podcast hosting site. So your podcast host gives you stats on your overall data, like your episodes, how many downloads, your listeners, all that jazz. But with Chartable, I want to see where my podcast is ranking within my category. So I'm going to be doing some videos and some podcast episodes about how to pick your podcast category. So stay tuned for that. But for now, just know that it's important to be in a very specific category for your specific podcast. This is going to vary from show to show, industry to industry, and all that jazz. But I just want you to kind of wrap your head around your category is very important. So don't just kind of overlook the fact that, oh, it's just a button I have to click when I'm setting my podcast up. No, it's a lot more important than that, but we're going to get into that in another episode. So how should you use the data that you collect from Chartable? So this is going to be awesome for marketing your podcast, whether you're marketing it to your audience or to potential sponsors, or you are using your podcast as a means to an end, whether it's part of your business and you want to get on speaking stages, or you want to write a book and you're trying to get a book deal, or you're trying to just secure a literary agent. You can use the data from Chartable in order to do that. So here's a perfect example. My podcast, the Proffitt podcast, has charted, and it has ranked multiple times in the top 100 of my specific category. Now, this goes back to categories and why categories are very important. If I had picked a category that was super, super general, and let's just say I picked business, okay? Because I do talk to entrepreneurs on this podcast, but if I had just selected entrepreneurism or business or just marketing, then I wouldn't have ranked as highly as I have in the category that I selected. So I am in the education how-to category because I teach people. I teach you how to create a podcast. I teach you how to start, launch, and market your podcast. That is why I picked this category. And previously, I was in business. Y'all, I was like number probably 1,500, like a ridiculous number, and I was never getting on the charts. But once I picked a different category, once I switched from education how-to, my podcast is consistently in the top 100 or right around that. And actually, I looked this up. This is so cool. This is what you can do with Chartable, and it's so amazing. I can see where I've peaked because it changes. Like, you're not like, oh, I'm in the top, 3 spots, and then all of a sudden you go, like, it changes every single day because other people in my industry and within my category may update their podcast more often than I do. Or they may publish, like I publish mine out on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They may publish something on Friday, and then I'm not putting content out over the weekend. So their numbers may jump. So just know that it does fluctuate often, but there are, like, you can see where you are on the charts. And when I'm saying the charts, I'm mostly talking about Apple Podcast charts, because that is where most of my listeners at least, are listening to podcasts. So there are charts for Spotify and for some of the other platforms, but as of now, as of me recording this, it's mostly coming from Apple Podcast. So that's where I'm looking, and I can tell people when I go to promote my podcast or promote something that I'm doing, I can say, I have a podcast that is consistently in the top 100 of the education how-to category in Apple Podcast. And what's even cooler, I peaked at number 23. So I could even go as far as to say my podcast has been in the top 25 podcasts of the education how-to category. Now, this is totally going to be up to you on using this information out of integrity, because I don't consistently say I'm in the top 25 because I don't feel like I have the right to do that out of an integrity move. I can say I've been in the top 25 because I was at number 23, but I want you to use this information in an ethical way, and I want you to use it out of integrity in a way to deliver this information to your audience or other potential people that you would give this information to, okay? Like, don't be lying, don't be stretching the truth, don't be saying that you're in this when you're not, because I can look up my own information, but so can everybody else, okay? Like, that's just another thing to keep in mind is if you told me your podcast name, I could go look it up right now and see if you're telling the truth, if you're actually where you say you are on the charts. So if you have been maybe fibbing your numbers a little bit, just know people can go look this up. Like, your data, yes, there are parts of your hosting site that, that's not public knowledge to everybody, but people can see where you are on the charts. So don't say you're something that you're not. I totally believe in karma and stuff like that coming back to bite you in the butt if you are not honest about it. So keep that in mind. But as we're sitting here talking about numbers and, charts and all these other things, tell me in the comments below, what's one of the ways that you think that you can use Chartable to promote your podcast, whether it's marketing, like, are you trying to secure sponsorships? Or are you trying to use this as, I see it as a cool way to market your speaking abilities. Like, if you were trying to be a public speaker and you being able to say, hey, I have a podcast that's been in the top 25 of my category, that would make my ears perk up. If I was looking for someone to come speak at my event, that would be a super cool thing to say. So let me know in the comments below how you plan on using the information you're finding at Chartable. Okay, let's get back to the video. The last thing I want to talk about with Chartable and the way that I use it for my own podcast is I like to see the other podcasts that are ranking in my category, because this is an opportunity, y'all. Like, there could be some potential collaborations. There could be people that you want to work with, maybe people that you want to invite them onto your podcast, or you want to get onto their podcast, because I see this all the time where people are saying, well, I want to grow and I don't, I want to reach out, but I don't even know, like, do I just start searching up random keywords on Apple Podcast? I think that this is a great place to start. Go to Chartable, go to your specific category and see who the big players are. Maybe see who the top 10 podcasts are within your niche. That way you can check them out. Like, hey, is this a podcast that aligns with your audience, and would they find it valuable if you had that guest come onto your show? Or even better, you could pitch yourself to these podcasts. It's a great place to start. And y'all, there's usually at least 100 to 200 podcasts listed in the charts at any given time. So you no longer have the excuse of, oh, I don't know where to look. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. You can get into Chartable, start poking around in the different categories that your audience is, because that's what's important. Is I could go into the business category or the marketing or entrepreneurship and start poking around and seeing which podcast do I want to get on. So I hope that this idea just kind of blew the whole guesting on podcasts out of the water for you. And you're thinking, man, there is a lot more potential out there than I initially thought. And that is how I want you to use Chartable to your advantage. So I hope you learned something about Chartable today and you got some really good insight from this video. Make sure you hit that thumbs up and subscribe below. That way you don't miss any future episodes of this show, because I love talking about podcasting. I know it's I get super dorky and super geeky whenever I do all of these videos, but it's so much fun for me and it's a genuine obsession. I love it. I know, super dork, whatever, but check out these other podcasting videos and make sure that you sign up for the free 5-day Create Your Podcast Bootcamp. And remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere.